Malaria occurrence statistics. In 2015, an estimated of 212 million cases of malaria occurred worldwide. 429,000 people died, mostly children in the Africa region. About 1,600 cases of malaria are diagnosed in the United States each year. In Malaysia, the reported confirmed cases is 1,875 and 8 confirmed deaths in 2015. The disease affects millions. People with other conditions such as HIV, pregnant women, young children under 5 years old, and travelers returning from countries where malaria transmission occurs, many from sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. So, what exactly is malaria? Malaria is a mosquito-borne disease caused by Plasmodium parasite. It is also one of the diseases caused by a eukaryotic parasite. The species of Plasmodium that infects humans include Plasmodium falciparum, Plasmodium vivax, Plasmodium ovale, and Plasmodium malaria. The two species who bring the biggest threats are Plasmodium falciparum and Plasmodium vivax. It affects the liver, the brain, and the red blood cell, causing pain, shivering, sweating, and anemia. It is transmitted from an infected person to another by blood-sucking mosquitoes of the genus Anopheles. The female mosquito feeds on blood, while the male mosquito feeds on plant juices. Thus, the female mosquito is described as the vector as it transfers disease from one host to another. Mosquito is a blood-feeding heterotroph, not a parasite. Mosquito tends to feed at night, targeting on sleeping victims. The life cycle of Plasmodium can be summarized as follows. After mating, the female Anopheles mosquito requires a meal of blood in order for her eggs to mature. The eggs are later laid in water. The female mosquito bites a human and injects saliva to prevent the blood from clotting and blocking her needle-like mouth parts. If the saliva contains Plasmodium, they enter the human blood system and is carried to the liver. In the liver, Plasmodium multiplies to produce massive number and then are released into the blood plasma. When another female mosquito bites an infected human, these gametes are sucked up along with the blood. The gametes fuse to form a zygote that develops into a cyst on the wall of the mosquito's stomach. The cyst releases Plasmodium cells which migrate to the salivary gland, ready to be injected into a human next time the mosquito feeds.
So right after a person is diagnosed with malaria, they sort of have to start treatment right away to give the person the best chance of survival with as few complications possible. Let's say anti-malaria drugs are used to treat the disease. Well, we have to make sure we're using the right drugs. And to do that, we'll need to know a few things first. Firstly, we need to know what type of Plasmodium is causing the infection, because some subtypes will just respond to drugs that others might not. We'll need to know how the patient's doing. Is this an uncomplicated malaria with fevers, chills, flu, that kind of stuff? And we'll also need to know if these parasites causing the infection are resistant to any of our treatment. Like maybe the infection was picked up in a part of the world known to have treatment-resistant malaria. So let's talk about the types of medicine that can cure a malaria infection. So remember, there's essentially two stages of infection with malaria. There's a liver phase where the sporozoites infect your liver cells and multiply into thousands of merozoites. And then there's a red blood cell phase where these little merozoites break out of your liver cells and infect your red blood cells. And once they're inside your red blood cells, they turn into what are called trophozoites. They hang out for a while and then they multiply into thousands more merozoites again. So currently we have medicine that's able to treat any of these stages, which is good news. So for uncomplicated malaria, the person usually gets treated with combination therapy, which means they take a few different drugs to treat their malaria. So they usually take 2 to 3 drugs, because if you just use 1 drug to treat a malaria infection, the parasites will figure out how to become resistant to that 1 drug, and we don't want that. See, this is already a huge problem, as there's already a lot of drug resistance that's cropped up in different parts of the world. So that's why it's very important to use combination therapies to make sure that no potentially mutated parasites survive after treatment. Basically, the recommended combination for treating uncomplicated malaria is called ACT, artemisinin combination therapy. The word artemisinin here is actually the name of a plant that we get this main drug in this combo from. The drug is called artesunate, and we get it from the artemisinin plant. So artesunate does a few things. It creates a really toxic environment in the parasites that can kill them. And it also interferes with some pretty important proteins on the plasmodium surface that allows them to get their nutrients. So we're basically starving them to death. And the reason that ACT is built around this artesunate drug here is because artesunate is really effective against all types of plasmodium. And because there's not really much resistance to it right now. So the standard combo is artesunate plus some other drug with a different mechanism of action. So for example, one that's commonly used is mefloquine. A mefloquine disrupts the acid-base balance in the parasite, which is extremely lethal to the parasites. Or sometimes you get a combo of 2 synergistic drugs, sulfadoxine and pyrimethamine, which stops the malaria from being able to replicate its DNA properly, which means it can't really reproduce really well. So keep in mind that everything I've just explained, that's the standard treatment for uncomplicated malaria caused specifically by Plasmodium falciparum. Plasmodium vivax, on the other hand, that has to be treated in a different way. So for the blood stage, you could still use ACT just like with falciparum, or often a drug called chloroquine. But there's a fair amount of resistance to chloroquine amongst the malarial parasites nowadays, mostly in Southeast Asia, Malaysia included. But how does chloroquine work? Well, malaria parasites feed on blood. They actually like the hemoglobin part of red blood cells, but when they're digesting the hemoglobin from a red blood cell, they release the heme part of the hemoglobin molecule. So they're just floating around because they don't want to eat it. And free heme floating around here is actually toxic to both them, the parasites, and the red blood cells. So the parasites want to stick around in the red blood cell for a while to live, right? So these parasites then convert this heme into crystals of hemozoin, which is non-toxic to the cell or to them. So chloroquine and actually mefloquine does this as well. These drugs prevent the parasites from converting the toxic heme into non-toxic hemozoin crystals. So all the resulting heme, it builds up and it just makes the environment really toxic, and the parasites end up dying, which is great. So that's the blood stage with Plasmodium vivax. So vivax is a bit special actually. It has a liver phase as well. So here's a clip of Khan Academy's video on that part.
But vivax is interesting though. It likes to hang out in the liver as well, in the dormant phase, unlike falciparum. Falciparum sort of gets on with it and causes a super severe infection pretty quickly. Whereas vivax, right, while it can still be really severe, it takes it a bit slower. So it likes to transform into what are called hypnozoites. And then these hypnozoites take naps in the liver cells for extended periods of time. So it's kind of like having a chronic malaria infection with vivax. So you have to kill the liver parasites, and you can do that with primaquine, which is actually effective against all types of malaria, but we especially like it for how it deals with the vivax hypnozoites. Anyway, the primaquine works by blocking oxidative metabolism in these hypnozoites in the liver, so it stops them from being able to make enough energy to survive, so they die.
So now it comes down to the prognosis of malaria treatment. Generally, if you get proper treatment, then usually you can expect a full recovery.
There are 3 ways we can prevent malaria. They are reducing the population of mosquitoes, avoiding being bitten by mosquitoes, and also by using drugs. We can reduce the population of mosquitoes through fogging, which involves the spraying of mosquito-killing chemicals into the air. We can also reduce the population of mosquitoes by spreading oil over water surface. By doing so, mosquito larvae and pupae will be unable to breathe as larvae hatch and develop in water, but breathe air by coming to the surface. However, this method is not suitable for large bodies of water, which serve as habitats to other aquatic organisms. Removing sources of water in which they can breed by draining marshes and clearing vegetation is also an effective measure. Biological controls such as introducing fish that feed on mosquito larvae, for example the mosquito fish, into large permanent bodies of water is also an effective measure. We can also use sterile insect technique, SIT, which involves releasing large numbers of sterile males. Sterile males compete with wild males to mate with the females. Females that mate with a sterile male produce no offspring, thus reducing the next generation's population. Sterilization is induced through the effects of irradiation on the reproductive cells of the insects. SIT does not involve the release of insects modified through transgenic, which is genetic engineering processes. The most effective way to prevent ourselves from being infected with malaria is by avoiding being bitten by mosquitoes. To do this, we should stay somewhere that has effective air conditioning and screening on doors and windows. If this isn't possible, make sure doors and windows are closed properly. Sleeping under an intact mosquito net that has been soaked in insecticide every 6 months and also using insect repellent when going outdoors will help too. It is advised to apply sunscreen first before applying DEET chemical containing repellents. We are also advised to wear long-sleeve clothes and avoid going outdoors at dusk and evening as mosquitoes are especially active during these times. Using prophylactic drugs, that is, drugs that prevent pathogens from infecting and breeding in a person, can also prevent the spread of malaria. However, in many parts of the world, Plasmodium has evolved resistance to some of these drugs.
So what's the world doing about it?
The Center for Disease Control and Prevention actively participates in global malaria efforts to work with rollback malaria partners, including the World Health Organization, WHO, the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, the World Bank, the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, International Red Cross, and the Expanded Program on Immunization, EPI. In 2005, CDC and USAID jointly implemented the President's Malaria Initiative, an initiative that aims to reduce malaria deaths by 50% in 15 selected African countries. Angola, Benin, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Ghana, Ethiopia, Guinea, Kenya, Liberia, Madagascar, Malawi, Mali, Mekong, Mozambique, Nigeria, Rwanda, Senegal, Tanzania, Uganda, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. CDC provides a PMI resident advisor in each country to help manage PMI activities. The PMI utilizes a rapid scale-up of 4 proven and highly effective malaria prevention and treatment measures: insecticide-treated mosquito nets, ITNs, indoor residual spraying, IRS, accurate diagnosis, and prompt treatment with artemisinin-based combination therapies, ACTs, as we mentioned previously, and intermittent preventive treatment of pregnant women, IPTP. Besides that, the World Health Organization has organized an annual World Malaria Day on the 25th of April, during which talks, movies, and panels are held for awareness of the disease and how the public community can help donate and contribute to the anti-malaria movement. Honorees who have contributed to the fight against malaria are also celebrated. Besides that, the Malaria No More campaign is also another similar campaign held.